Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing incredibly well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I'm so delighted you've joined me for part 3 of our story tonight. If you haven't heard part 1 or part 2, don't forget to click on the description. So let's get started with part 3 of our story. The Dyers soberly watched the 2 police inspectors walking away from their property and driving away in their police car. They were rather bemused and confounded over the strange turn of events, for this was turning out to be a less than agreeable weekend, when the fate of a young man seemed to be lying precariously by a silver thread, and his whereabouts a complete mystery. Once Mr. Dyer had composed himself, he slowly turned around to his daughter and said, "You're not in any trouble, Chloe. I'm proud of the way you conducted yourself back there, and for being completely honest with Detective Kingsley and his female companion. But don't you ever do something like that again. Do you have any idea how dangerous it is to take someone's prescription medications? It could easily have killed you."
"I'm sorry, Dad. I just guess I didn't think properly."
"That's the big problem, Chloe," said her father ruefully. "You young people never think when it comes to drugs. You all have this insane notion that you're immortal, and if something bad happens, that it's not going to be you. But I've got news for you, young lady. It doesn't matter how young you are. Death is no respecter of persons, and it will take you if you're not diligent. So make sure that next time you think before you make a very rash decision that could entirely affect your life, or literally end it if you're not careful."
"I'm so sorry, Dad. I won't ever do it again. And even those pills, they just made me feel so ill."
"I'm glad to hear that, Chloe. I'm very pleased you didn't get a positive reaction from them. We'll just have to pray that Lennox will be found safe and well."
"But supposing he's dead, Dad?"
"I'm sorry, Chloe. I hate to say this to you, but based on what Detective Kingsley told us, that is a real possibility. If one of those tablets could knock out a rhino, you may find that Lennox may not wake up ever again. I need to prepare you for such a possibility."
"Must you, sweetheart, put such dreadful ideas into Chloe's head? We don't know where Lennox is, and I'm quite sure he will be fine, and that they will find him." "But what if they don't, Mum? And what if he is dead? Supposing Dad is right? We'll cross that bridge, sweetheart, when we come to it, won't we? But what I'd like to know is who managed to yank a gold BMW out of a lake? And what was it doing there in the first place?" Chloe's mother began to flap around like a pigeon. "I'm going to start up a prayer line at once. I'll phone as many people as I can. We need to all pray for Lennox's safe return."
Lennox's account. I was very excited to be going out with Chloe Dyer. She was not just a pretty face. She was more than that, even though she was not aware of it, and that made her all the more special. I had noticed her a long time ago, as even with her braces and bottle glasses, there was something unique about her. But the day she sauntered into our school after having abandoned her glasses, her blue eyes just popped out, and I think in that moment when she crossed my path on the school playground, I knew I had to take this girl out. She was a stunner, and there wasn't a boy in the school that didn't notice the radical transformation to her appearance. I heard some of the lads say, "The ugly duckling has become a swan." But the truth is, Chloe was never ugly. She may have thought she was, and who would have blamed her for that? I certainly wouldn't feel attractive if I'd been forced to wear glasses and braces like she did. I certainly would challenge any girl in our school to look good in those. I'll never forget Chloe's face when I first asked her out. She was so surprised and bewildered, as if she could not believe I found her attractive. When I first took Chloe home to meet my parents for Sunday lunch the week before the pill-popping party, my mother said to me, "That's the first girl you've actually brought home, Lennox, that has some substance. She's quite the keeper, she is." My father had wholeheartedly agreed. I knew they were right, of course. I was young at the time, naive, and a work in progress. But I had sagaciously deduced that you become a more attractive person if you've been down a few rabbit holes and dark bumpy journeys down the road of life that have been more than a little tumultuous. Chloe had been through hell and back, being bullied for her braces, her glasses, and her weight, with a couple of spiteful, mean-spirited kids calling her fatty. Then there was that precocious, self-absorbed cheerleader Lucinda, asking her if she was pregnant. I mean, who does that? Lucinda had an unkind, very filthy mouth on her. My father disliked her from the moment he met her. She was tactless, insincere, ruthlessly uninhibited by that toxic tongue of hers that seemed to spout only poison. She was born with a silver spoon in her mouth, with a rich daddy who gave in to her every whim. As a result, her vainglorious, arrogant, self-indulgent attitude was very unbecoming. I really believe when I started dating Chloe, all the boys were touched by a bit of the green-eyed monster. They knew there was so much more to Chloe than just good looks, because she was as gentle as a female doe. Suffice to say, a few of my friends were a bit apprehensive about my inviting Chloe to a pill-popping party. "How do you know you can trust her? What if she goes blabbing to Mummy and Daddy?" People worry about that sort of thing when you go to a party like that, especially when you're introducing someone new to pill-popping. I unequivocally did not doubt for a second that I could completely trust Chloe. She was eager to come along to the party. She also believed her mother had some old prescription medications that could be used. Honestly, when I look back to what we did then, I think how could we have been so stupid, so naive, so ignorant, and so reckless? If I knew then what I knew now, I'd never have thought the practice was so benign. I was to learn later from my two very relieved parents, happy to find me alive, that prescription medications are one of the leading forms of death in the United States, when doctors screw up a prescription and make a fatal mistake, which is why people need to always ensure that their meds are correct. Ostensibly, having said all that, how much more dangerous is it to haphazardly take things that you have no concept of knowing what they contain? I learnt the grievously hard way not to play Russian roulette with my life, that I could so easily have lost on that inauspiciously fateful night, only because of one thing: I was a complete and utter fool. The pill-popping parties had been successful. On 2 separate occasions, I experienced an amazing buzz. I'm not sure what those medications were that I took at those parties, and frankly I don't want to know. That's the whole idea of the party, to see if you've hit the jackpot and end up getting that feeling of euphoria. Sometimes you don't get a reaction at all, but people enjoy themselves, smoking pot and drinking a ton of alcohol. If the pills fail to work, at the very least you can get inebriated, for everybody is looking to receive that high. Some medications react with the alcohol, and people can get really sick, but it was a risk that everyone was prepared to take. We were naively ignorant. On the evening of the pill-popping party, I picked up Chloe at about 7:30 from her home, after she'd eaten dinner so that her stomach was lined. I'd never met her mother, so when she opened the door, I was taken rather aback. Chloe's mother was an attractive woman and looked a lot like her daughter. "Hello, Lennox," she said, gesturing me to come into the house. "Chloe will be down in a moment." She asked me all about myself and was terribly friendly, insisting that she didn't want Chloe to wake her up when she returned home, as she and her husband were light sleepers. When we climbed into the car, Chloe showed me the pills she had stolen from her mother's medicine drawer. Chloe was nervous, much more so than usual. She told me she was sceptical about whether my friends would actually accept her. I told her to stop being silly. If she was my girlfriend, of course they'd accept her. I sensed she was troubled about popping pills. Chloe had never taken drugs of any kind before.
She had smoked a joint on one occasion and drunk a wee bit of alcohol from time to time, but in terms of her experiences with drugs, she'd never had a high before. I suspect she was rather intimidated about taking something that was strangely unfamiliar to her. I think I could appreciate that, for I was reluctant the first time I knocked back some prescription medications, so I understood her hesitancy. After I first experienced those waves of idyllic euphoria from the meds I'd taken, I became rather addicted to pill popping. It represented an opportunity for me to escape the rat race of daily life. I was as boldly uninhibited and adventurous as a wild stallion, bolting away from its stable block. There was no holding me back. So yes, I was looking extremely forward to this party, and I was certainly hoping with all my heart that Chloe would also have a wild time, and I was anticipating that she likely would. I wanted her to fully experience a rush of euphoria, but that ominous party we were about to attend would leave us scarred for life and adverse to experimenting with any kind of narcotics. Once bitten, twice shy definitely applied to us. It was supposed to be summer, but it seemed like anything but. It was a very nippy evening, and most people arrived at the party feeling pretty chilly. But luckily the girl who was hosting the party had organised some heating lamps in the large entertainment area, so when we arrived at the party it was pleasantly warm. Kelly Carpenter's parents were out of state, so she knew we could use the barn without her parents suspecting a thing. It was regularly used by them as a wedding venue on their sizable plot of land, which was called Misty Hills. It was the quintessential place to have a fabulous party, especially without suspicious adults breathing down our backs and clandestinely watching our every move. Parties like that were very lame. It was a stroke of luck that the previous party, hosted at the barn, was in fact a barn dance, so there were haystacks strewn around the place that were so comfortable to lie back on. To give Kelly her due, she'd done an amazing job in making the party look so welcoming, with colourful uplighters, chairs and tables, and a large entertainment area where people could dance. There was someone managing the bar, and Kelly had stolen a lot of extra booze left over from parties. But people also contributed their own alcohol and snacks to the party, as well as prescription medications that were thrown into a large purple glass bowl, which turned into a lucky dip, where you removed about 5 or 6 pills and knocked them back with some alcohol, and waited to see if you would get any kind of reaction. I think there is a certain amount of thrill about the anticipation. It's a little like attending a car rally, waiting to see if your name will finally be pulled out of the prize draw, so you can walk away with a brand new Land Rover Discovery. Granted, the chances that you won't be lucky are very high, but the hoping can be part of the thrill. When I arrived at the party, I held Chloe's hand, and my cooler with the other hand, and we walked away from the parking bay towards a long cobbled path hemmed in by large white rose bushes and hedges of lavender. We walked towards the barn. It was a dark night, but the outside lights on the barn were on, as well as several night lanterns that the host had placed strategically around the paths. My best friend Douglas discreetly took me to one side. "Are you sure you can trust your girlfriend? She's not going to blab about the pill popping, is she?" "Of course not," I said indignantly. "If you must know, she's raided her parents' medicine cabinet." "Good, good. I had to ask," said Douglas, looking heartily relieved and rubbing his hands. "I needed to be sure. I've heard of pill-popping parties being busted by busy-bodying, self-righteous, prying people who can't keep their noses out of other people's business. I don't want someone to call the coppers on us. I couldn't bear it if that happened tonight. There are over 100 people coming to this party, you know. It's going to be a ball. And Kelly has pulled out the stops. There's extra booze on offer. Oh, my word, it's going to be amazing. I'd simply hate anything to go wrong." Douglas, who was smoking a joint, swaggered away happily towards the clusters of people, blowing out puffs of white smoke, and beginning to look extremely chilled. A large flock of people were gathering around the bar to fill up plastic cups with alcohol,
as Kerry Carpenter did not want her parents' glasses to be broken. For one poignant moment, something unexplainable happened. I was unable to shake off this malign, prescient feeling of prognostication that hinted to me in a silent whisper that I shooed away, almost as if reprimanding a mischievous dog for lifting its leg on the furniture, that something was going to go perilously awry. I'm not an intuitive person by any manner of means, but the percussively doomful feeling persisted, like a nagging voice in the back of my head that whispered over and over again, "Don't do it! Don't do it! Don't take those pills!" I had heard of unfavourable premonitions before, but that kind of mumbo-jumbo carried no weight for me. My sister and mother believed in such things, but I had never been superstitious. I decided I was having an objectionable attack of the nerves, and I was just being silly, probably because Chloe was with me. I had been to half a dozen pill-popping parties before, and nothing disconcerting or consequential had ever occurred. On the contrary, most parties I'd attended before had been a blast. I will say that when Chloe and I took our pills, I could feel my hands beginning to tremble as I threw them to the back of my throat, swallowing them down very quickly with some vodka, lime and lemonade. I had to look confident in front of Chloe, who was a virgin to this experience, so I stuck out my tongue and said, "All gone. It's your turn now." Chloe looked at me nervously. "Are you sure this is a good idea? I've never taken tablets before like this." "Don't be silly," I teased her. "That's the whole idea, don't you see? Not knowing what you've taken. It's part of the fun." In the beginning, the party was pretty mellow and laid back, but people were friskily dancing under the bright lights of the disco. The mood was animated and the party electric. At one point, me and Chloe watched a young lady throwing off her clothes, claiming it was far too hot, and dancing unself-consciously on the table, completely starkers, followed by another man who did much the same. People were laughing, cheering and clapping, while others were violently throwing up, and the rancid smell of vomit around the whole barn was completely repulsive. At this point of the evening, I was feeling slightly light-headed, as if I might just faint. "Are you all right?" Chloe asked me, her face looking up at me in concern. "You've gone awfully white, Lennox. You're not feeling sick, are you?" "No, I'll be fine," I assured her, not feeling terribly confident. What the hell had I taken? It didn't make me feel good at all. The spaced-out whirling feeling was making my head spin like a bobbin in a sewing machine, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. I took Chloe's hand in mine, squeezing it tightly. "I'm just a little light-headed, that's all. Let's go and sit there on that haystack." I know that Chloe was not enjoying herself. That was plain to see. She was very apprehensive and on edge. "Why are so many people getting sick?" she asked me gingerly. "Some people are throwing up all over the place." "It's not a big deal. It just means their body has rejected the pills, that's all. They had a bad reaction. They'll be fine," I told her. "I don't want to end up taking my clothes off and dancing on the table. If I become like that, you will stop me doing something silly, won't you? I'll die of embarrassment if I have to see what I did the next day." "Of course I won't let anything like that happen to you," I assured her. I was relieved when we sat down together to watch the party. People seemed to be enjoying themselves, but I was beginning to see stars. At this point in time, I think I felt remote, disconnected, insouciant and detached, but certainly interested enough to listen to the conversation, which I have to say was a tad boring. Several people seemed to be having a spirited argument together. I think there were 3 of them arguing together. Kelly, her boyfriend Brian, and her cousin Barker. They could not seem to agree on what they were discussing. Kelly Carpenter kept going on and on about the trouble she was going to be in with her parents. "But you don't understand what my dad is like. He can be a hell of a scary. He beat me up once when he got mad. He might do it to me again. Oh my God, what am I going to do?" She went on and on about how she'd be grounded, how her parents would never ever speak to her again as long as she lived, how she wished to God she had never agreed to have this pathetic party,
And why was it so goddamned unfair that this had to happen to her when she was hosting a party? It would seem Kelly's boyfriend was trying to calm Kelly down, telling her not to overreact. Don't be dramatic. Don't you worry, babe. We'll think of a solution. Everyone's left the party. No one's noticed a damn thing. But that's not the point, Brian. What are we going to do with a dead body? I can't be blamed for this. I'm not going to have the fingers pointed at me. Do you have any idea what my dad is going to do to me if someone has died on our property? They soon began to discuss things in hushed whispers, so what was said, I could not be sure. But then they spoke loudly again, as if they suddenly realized that no one could be eavesdropping on their conversation. Well, have you got a better idea? Came a belligerent voice. The police will believe it's an accident. They will think he was high, drove himself into a lake. They'll never find his body. Years could go by, and no one will be any the wiser. It'll be a mystery, an unsolved mystery, unless, of course, the water goes down in a drought, and then the car is spotted in the water. His body may never be found, and even if it is, everybody's memory of the party will be very vague by then. But what if they do find his body in the lake, and the car is on my property? For God's sake, people will be pointing fingers at me. I refuse to be blamed for this death. It's not my fault. He died on his own watch. He took those pills, not me. We will cross that bridge when we come to it. He'll just be another missing person. We can all say we have no idea what happened to him. The police will never think of looking in this lake. But if the police ask about the party, one person will blab, and they'll find out the party was hosted here, won't they? Well, you have nothing to hide, have you? You're not responsible for this man's death. You could say, yes, you had a few people at a party here at Misty Hills. What's wrong with that? You can say Lennox was in attendance, and then bogged off in a drunken stupor. You were sure you last saw him leave in his gold BMW. You told him not to drive in his inebriated state. Then he was gone. You have no idea where he went. If the worst-case scenario happens, and they do discover he was high on drugs, in his drunkenness he never left your property. He drove into the lake, where he drowned himself. No one would point a finger at us. We didn't kill him, remember that. No one forced him to take those pills, as you rightly point out. We are just hiding a body. That is all we are guilty of. And if the body is ever recovered, we can admit to the party. But we have no knowledge of how Lennox's car ended up in the lake. We plead ignorance. Agreed? I realized in horror these people were discussing me. I wanted to say, hold your horses. What are you going on about? I'm right here. I'm absolutely fine. I'm not dead. Why are you talking about me like this? You're not planning to put me in a car and drown me in the lake, are you? For God's sake, don't be so stupid. I'm alive. I'm alive. Oh my God, his girlfriend is here. You don't think she's heard anything we've said? She's just passed out. Oh, she hasn't heard anything. Of course she hasn't heard anything. She's not dead too, is she? No, she's not. She's got a pulse. She's lying passed out next to him. She must have taken some heavy stuff. She is fine. She's definitely breathing. She'll be all right. Whatever she took, it knocked her out. I don't think she's heard a word of what we've discussed. So we're game for this, are we? Asked Brian. Remember, there is no going back once we do this. Do you understand? Of course I'm not bloody game for this, but I don't think we've got much choice in the matter. But are you sure he's dead? We must establish that he's dead, or we could go down for his murder, said Kelly. I do remember someone was touching me. I tried to respond, but I was incapable of moving my body. Wiggle your toe, Lennox, for God's sake, I told myself. Flash an eyelash. Do something. They're going to drive your car into the lake, and then you'll really drown. You have to do something. You have to get their attention. He's definitely dead. I think we have to do this. We haven't got a choice, came Brian's voice. I managed to blink an eyelash and sighed with relief when I heard Barker say, Wait a minute. I don't think he's dead. I'm sure he flashed an eyelash. Don't you know anything? said Brian dismissively. "When people die, some involuntary muscles naturally relax. Of course he's dead. He's not bloody moving, and he's got no pulse, and his heart is not beating. I've checked him several times over." "So he is dead?" came Kelly's voice. "Oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this. But there is no way I am calling 911. No way. Because if my father has any idea this happened, I am already dead. I promise you I am DEAD. "Don't you worry. This is sorted. He's definitely dead," said Brian. The next thing I remember is hearing shuffling movements and the sense of being carried. And then I was thrown into my car, onto the front seat. I knew I was in my car because I could smell the air freshener, but I couldn't respond to my exterior environment, and I was terribly afraid. I know now what it feels to be locked up in your own body, to hear everything going on around you, and to be able to do nothing about it. I gather that a couple of people who thought I was dead wanted to hide the evidence of my deceased body, to avoid getting into trouble. But the problem was, I wasn't dead. I was very much alive, and I had no way of communicating this information to them. I couldn't lift a finger or wiggle a toe. The next thing I knew, the car engine was revved up, and my car began to be driven into the water. I heard a splash, and the sound of people walking away, just talking. They didn't even bother to check the car was sinking, possibly because they were slightly inebriated themselves, and had no patience. They certainly lacked the cunning of someone who masterfully covers up their tracks. If they didn't want the police to find out what they'd done, they weren't exactly being scrupulous. Perhaps they stood by the age-old adage, out of sight, out of mind. Not altogether a great idea. I could feel water streaming into the car. At first, a little bit at a time. It was at my feet, then my ankles, and then it got steadily higher and higher. Everything became a foggy blur. At one point I was struggling to breathe, and I was wet. I don't remember much after that, only I found myself waking up to the sound of a crackling fire. I got to my feet and scrambled over to the corner of what appeared to be a cave, and then I began to throw up violently. I continued to get sick, while someone was tapping me on my back, encouraging me to throw up. There was such a vile taste in my mouth. It was so incredibly bitter that it made impossible to keep anything down. I remember a hand wiping my mouth, mopping my forehead, and leading me back to my bed to lie down. It felt like I was lying on the haystack at the party. I don't think I was wearing any clothes. It felt as if I was completely naked and was being covered with warm blankets. The crackling fire was so warm. I could hear it popping and spitting, and I could hear the low mumble of voices, talking in low tones. It was clear they were trying to be quiet, but I could swear they were speaking in a foreign language. I was feeling a lot better. I could feel my toes and hands, and was aware of my nakedness and the warmth of my environment. I knew I was alive, and I was safe, and the sound of voices comforted me. I was aware that someone was standing over me, watching me, and putting a spongy thing with nectar on it into my mouth, and wiping my head on several occasions. As strange as it sounds, it was enjoyable being lost between the world of my dreams and this abstract world, where someone appeared to be watching over me. It was so pleasant. I didn't actually want to wake up from it. I do not know how long I was like this, but when I did open my eyes, I was startled to find I was actually in a cave, as the walls that swaddled me on every side were made of stone, and a soft gossamer light pierced through a crack in the opening of the cave, which was sumptuously cosy. I could see the leftover charcoal from a recent fire in the middle of the floor, and was fully aware of the fact that I was lying on a bed made from straw, covered in moss, and my body was covered in deer pelts. For a moment I thought I had to be dreaming, for waking up in a cave was not a normal experience to me. That was when I saw movement in the corner of the cave, and to my astonishment a 7-foot-tall female Bigfoot, with an angelic-looking face, and the kindest eyes I have ever beheld, came dashing over to me. She was covered in long dark brown hair, and was powerfully built, and despite how intimidating she was in her appearance, I absolutely knew I was safe in her charge. When she walked over to me, her eyes were troubled. She was looking at me up and down. She spoke to me tenderly, and it was only much later that I realized that I understood everything she was saying. Kolota kikakwi, hasokolatinali, azikali kolopo. You had us worried. You were in a bad way. They tried to drown you because they thought you were dead, but you're alive. Your spirit was in detro. What does that mean? I asked her. She went into great length to explain to me what detro meant. Kolote akila kwasa a detro, likasi kolona, asakwashanikila, hisila tolo. It means you appear to be dead, but you're not. We can see the spirit realm, you see. My partner realized your body was being plunged into water, and that you needed to be rescued, for you would have drowned in that water. Your friends believed you were dead, because of your detro spirit, which can be very deceptive. They were scared, your friends. Don't judge them too harshly. Kalikaswani, oloshaki, lo barikaniko, hosani kalazelado, dilazana idetro, likolo sipa. When we brought you here, your body appeared to be dead, but your spirit was in detro. We knew you were caught between two worlds. We had to get the stuff you'd swallowed out of your system. We gave you bitter herbs to make you very sick. Do you remember? You kept getting violently sick. At one point, we very nearly lost you. We put eagle's feathers on your neck and a strength stone in your hand, and carried on putting bitter herbs down your throat and honey water to give you strength. Now you need to go back and lie down. I do remember my head was spinning, so I returned to bed, feeling very floaty at one point. But the female Bigfoot encouraged me to put on my clothes, which I did in a hazy fog. I remember being consciously aware of the fire going at night, and the sound of the Bigfoots talking and playing games together. I frequently heard whistling, and sometimes snorting, when the Bigfoots were sleeping. I vaguely remember the blurred silhouettes of 5 creatures standing over me, with concern in their dark eyes. They talked about me an awful lot, and occasionally someone would sit by me, patting my back. I always heard the voice in my head saying, "You're out of detro. Give your spirit time to settle in your body, and then you will grow strong." I remember when I did regain my strength, 5 Bigfoots were standing over me, wishing me well. Golati casa, lotola pasa, hoshanaka. We don't want you to remember your time in this cave, I was told. We need to give you amnesia. I want you to look into my partner's eyes. Please, I begged, don't let me forget everything. I want to remember being here. The Bigfoots were reluctant, and the female said to the male, "Let him remember a few details, in a month's time or so, and by then, even if he speaks, many will not believe his story." "Very well," said the male Bigfoot. I thanked the Bigfoots profusely for taking care of me, and then I looked into the Bigfoot's eyes, and after that I remembered nothing, until a farmer found me wandering around his woodgrove, looking confused and disorientated, and he called the police. I was subsequently taken home with my parents standing over my bed, asking me where on earth I had been, and of course I could not tell them. "Sweetheart, can you try and remember what happened to you?" my mother asked me. "We established you went to a pill-popping party at Misty Hills. I wish to God you hadn't done something like that. Your BMW was hauled out of a lake. The door was pulled off its hinges, but you were nowhere to be found. We all thought you were dead. And now a farmer riding his ATV in the woodgrove 3 days after you went missing finds you wandering around the woods looking delirious. At first you didn't even know your name. You didn't even know who I was." For weeks after the event, I could give my parents no answers to any of their questions, until one day my memory came back. But out of respect for the Bigfoot family that rescued me, I chose to say nothing. But Chloe was to learn my story when we got married 5 years later, and it is only now I am sharing my story with you, in this anonymous forum, and whether you believe my story or not, is water off a duck's back to me. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. What can I say? All I know is that when you take drugs, it can be incredibly dangerous, and especially prescription medications. I do admire the courage of taking something that is so, you don't know what it is, and you have no idea what kind of result it's going to have on your body. But of course, Lennox is absolutely right about it. It is very frightening to take something and to have that kind of a reaction. And I cannot imagine knowing you're not dead and these people are trying to bury your body because they're afraid of getting into trouble, so they want to get rid of the evidence, and all the time you're alive. Do you know, in the olden days, people would often bury people with a bell on their toes, so that should you actually have been buried alive, you can ring the bell on your toe to alert people to the fact that you are actually alive. It is possible to actually be alive and people to think you're dead. What an incredible story, and to think that those Bigfoots were able to see that this person was in detro. In other words, he was floating between two worlds, he wasn't dead yet, and so they rescued him. What an amazing story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.